I always thank God for the lectionary, and I probably shouldn't, should I? I mean, it's the lectionary is an amazing thing because it forces me to do things I sometimes may not want to do. It forces me to move on, and so this parable kind of spoke to me this week because even though well thought out knee-jerk reactions are still knee-jerk reactions. And so sometimes when we do things with emotion and passion, and when they're our first response, we sometimes may get into trouble with that. And so this really spoke to me this week. It also kind of makes me laugh because everything that Jesus said when he was teaching, this is all Old Testament stuff. It's Old Covenant stuff. Because the New Covenant did not start until Jesus died and then rose again. That's when the New Covenant started. So these are the scriptures of the New Covenant. But when Jesus was walking on the earth, the reason he ticked so many people off is because he was talking about what was to come. He was not talking about Old Covenant. He was talking about especially kingdom things. He was talking about grace things, love things. He was talking passionately about things that we would think in our judgmental hindsight, we would think that they would understand who Jesus was. In fact, Jesus even kind of said that a few times. You know the scriptures, and you do not know that. And then he would talk about the Son of Man. But we sometimes judge people for not accepting Jesus' words at the time because we have a different lens that we're looking at things. Their lens was Jewish boy. I'm a good Jewish boy. And this Jewish boy is telling me that I'm not. If you ever want to make Jewish boys mad, tell them that they're not a good Jew. I grew up with many Jewish boys. More than half of my graduating class were Jewish boys. Well, and women and girls. Can I say women, girls? They were girls when I was young, and then they were young women when we graduated. How about that? There we go. This parable, the parable of the weeds, I've always kind of liked it. And one of the reasons that I liked it is because I thought I understood it, because Jesus, this is one of the few that he actually explains. And even in his explanation, there are questions that we always ask. But let me go ahead and read the text first. The King James puts it, parable of the tares. Parable of the tares. Jesus told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field, but while everyone was sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away. When the wheat sprouted and formed heads, then the weeds also appeared. Let me pause just a second. Do any of you know any time in history where this actually occurred? Because I do not. Where someone took the time and effort, it's in the Bible, I know, but this is a story in the Bible. This is a parable. But do you know of any instance where someone took the time and effort to sow weed seeds in someone's crop? I do not. But this is a story. I've stolen a watermelon before, but I've never sowed bad seed in someone else's garden.
Where's the scripture?
Oh, pardon me. Matthew 13. Matthew 13. I thought you were saying, well, yeah, it happened because it's in the Bible. Oh, okay. Now I'm going to read verse 27. The owner's servants came to him and said, "Sir, didn't you sow good seed in your field? Where did the weeds come from?" "An enemy did this," he replied. The servants asked him, "Do you want us to go and pull them up?" No, he answered, because while you're pulling up the weeds, you may root up the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest, and that time I will tell the harvesters, first collect the weeds and tie them into bundles to be burned, then gather the wheat and bring them into the barn. Now I'm going to skip down to the 36th verse. This is the explanation. Then he left the crowd and went into the house. His disciples came to him and said, "Explain to us the parable of the weeds in the field." Jesus answered, "The one who sowed the good seed is the Son of Man." That would be this Jesus guy. "The field is the world, and the good seed stands for the sons of the kingdom. The weeds are the sons of the evil one, and the enemy who sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and the harvesters are angels. And as weeds are pulled up and burned in the fire, so it will be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send out angels, and they will weed out of his kingdom everyone that causes sin and all who do evil. They will throw them into the fiery furnace, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun of the kingdom in the Father. He who has ears to hear, let him hear." There are a whole lot of things in that explanation we don't have time to talk about, which are some interesting ones. For example, the angels making the separation of the good from the bad, and the fiery furnace, and the weeping and gnashing of teeth. I'm not going to talk about those things today, but I am going to talk about the big picture, the weeds and the good wheat. I don't know about you, but I hate weeds. I hate weeds. I kind of wish that I could see the beauty in a weed, because wildflowers are technically weeds. The weeds and good things, we call them a different name, and we call them then a wildflower if they have a pretty blossom. But weeds in general, I hate it. I hate them. If the rainfall is less, weeds thrive. It's amazing the way that they're able to camouflage themselves. I have some hardy hibiscus that get about 6 feet tall. They have high plate blossoms. And every once in a while, there is a pigweed that survives, and they camouflage themselves in those hibiscus, and it's 6 foot tall as well. I can't believe that I missed it. Also, those little viney things, I don't know what those are called.
Bindweed.
Excuse me?
Bindweed.
Bind? Is that what that's called? A lady at Bellevue calls it Jack and the Beanstalk, because it grows so fast. And then that would make me the giant at the top of the Jack and the Beanstalk. But bindweed, I like that better.
Bindweed.
They kind of have a pretty blossom.
They have little white flowers.
They do, and they're very fragrant too.
Aren't those like morning glories?
You're a morning glory. No, similar looking foliage, yes, but these wrap themselves around the good plants, and they drive me nuts. You keep pulling, you keep pulling. Thing is, too, when you're weeding, and anyone who has ever weeded, you pull something up, and a good plant comes up with it. And then you kind of kick yourself, and then you get everything weeded. By the way, I do love my hula hoe. Do you remember that as shown on TV? The hula hoe that cuts both forwards and backwards, those really work. And I always think about Hawaii too whenever I'm weeding it. It takes the edge off. But when I'm done in my grass skirt and my hula hoe, and I'm done weeding, no matter where you go, if you look at it from a different way, you'll always find another weed. Always. And it drives me nuts. Now, I learned about weeding from my grandma. Now, I'm a city slicker through and through, but we had a big garden that every weekend we would tend the garden. We were indentured servants, basically. My childhood, I was an indentured servant, and I bought my freedom as soon as I was 18 years old. But I'm a city slicker, but I know about weeding. I've never walked the beans, which, do they still walk the beans? I mean,
I don't think so, not
Yep.
Roundup, herbicide. Someone still walks the beans now, Bob?
Yeah.
Really? Wow. Well, that I understand is work. I've detasseled corn before. That's ridiculous.
Walk beans and detasseled.
You walk beans, Andy. You are old school, and I'm glad you're still alive, Bob.
I have to.
Glad you're still alive.
Detassel corn.
You detassel corn? That's a whole pollination thing.
Good job.
That's a little too sexy for me to talk about from the pulpit. Okay.
Detasseling is child abuse.
It's being an indentured servant. That's what it is. Yeah. But I think one of the things that I do like about weeding is I see a problem and it's something that I get to fix. Now, I'm not the oldest in my family. The oldest child, they're usually the ones who have that characteristic. They see a problem, they want to fix it. But lots of people do. You see a problem, you want to fix it. If something breaks, I want to fix it. And if I can't fix it, I throw away so I'm not reminded that I cannot fix it. But the reason I like weeding is because it's something that I can fix. I can do it. And so I wonder if the servant of this landowner, I wonder if he was the oldest child because he saw what was happening. He saw these weeds were coming up with the good, and he said, do you want us to tear these weeds out? Do you want us to weed them? And the landowner said, no, we're going to let them grow up together, and then we'll settle it all at harvest time. And these weeds, these tares, a form of ryegrass, poisonous. They grow throughout Palestine. I personally like ryegrass. I don't eat it. I don't smoke it, but it's pretty hardy. It's better than the bluegrass that takes more water. But that was the situation. And when you see something happening and you think that you could do something about it, or maybe even that you should do something about it because it's part of your job, I wonder what consternation that gave that servant, because the landowner said, well, no, we're going to wait. You're going to watch them grow, and they're going to grow with the good, and we're going to wait. And then the biblical admonition, by your fruit you will know them. That's how they'll be separated. The wheat will get heads. You'll know what it is, and the tares will not. It will be a different kind of grass seed. By the way, wild rice is technically grass, and I like it. Illegally harvested it when I was an indentured servant for my uncle living in northern Minnesota. So we see the tares, we see the weeds, and we think we should do something about it. And we're invited to wait. I'm thankful for the scripture this week because of all the different happenings of the last month or two, especially with some of the riots and protests, the protests that were hijacked by rioters, the Mr. Floyd who was murdered, and we watched it. It was horrific, and it was an opportunity for some to hijack protests into something that they were never intended to be. And then BLM, which our denomination has kind of embraced wholeheartedly. Many churches have. When I first saw this and I have read about it, I wanted to kind of separate myself from that. I wanted to pull myself up from it. I don't think that the church should be in bed with a socialist Marxist organization who doesn't want who wants to tear down parental rights of fathers, taking the paternity, the patriarchy, as it is termed, out from families. As a family therapist, I've seen, and these are facts, they're not feelings, that if a father is involved with their children, 5 to 10 times more likely to succeed in many different avenues, and also 5 to 10 times more likely to keep them from doing horrific things. The suicide rate, going to jail, drug use, all these things are exponentially amplified if the father is not present and working with the family. And so these kind of things that drive me nuts. And then the kicker is, it feels like we can't even talk about it. We can't have a Socratic, open point, counterpoint conversation about it. Because depending on what your ethnicity is, well, you really don't know what you're talking about. And so I'm thankful for this parable because I need to wait. Things usually sort themselves out. That's what this parable is about. Now, democracy, the church, it is really messy business. When we see things going on and we make a snap judgment, or we think we know all of the factors that are going into what we see happening, which 9 times out of 10 we do not. We still want to act. The point of this parable is that God is love. God is gracious. God is someone who allows a whole lot of time for things to take place, because wherever there is life, there is hope. Wherever there is a human being functioning, they can change. And the problem is most of us don't believe that. Most of us don't believe that once we hit a certain age that we can change. But every single one of us can. Interesting word. Original Greek, when the landowner said to the servants, allow them to grow, it's the very same word that's used in the Gospel of Matthew for the Lord's Prayer. Allow and forgive. Permit them to grow, allow them to grow. It's the same word that is used for to forgive. In a Matthew version of the Lord's Prayer, to forgive as we have been forgiven. And to not practice forgiveness is to run the risk of becoming just like the evil that we think that we are against. There are examples of that as well. We, in this messy world where we see evil, and we may even have evil perpetrated against us, it's always the danger to fight fire with fire, or literally to become your enemy. We saw this post 9/11 when the CIA would, or contractors for the government would kidnap suspects, and they would take them to another country where there were no rights or rules, and they would use coercive tactics, what I would call torture, to get out of those people what they wanted to get out. The very thing we hated, in those instances, we also became. And that's the danger of uprooting too quickly. We can become what we hate, or we may even be uprooting ourselves. The landowner in the parable, he did not panic. He did not worry about the actions of the enemies, because he knew that eventually all things would be right at harvest time. You know, it drives me nuts, and it also gives me encouragement when I hear simplistic preaching about come to Jesus and everything's going to be all right. Ultimately, I do believe that in the end, you come to Jesus, everything's going to be all right. But I don't think coming to Jesus is going to solve every problem of your life. We see all the time where people are crushed by life circumstance. And I've told you before, when I was a young adult, there are times I felt like the church had lied to me, because this was not the way that I thought it was going to be. The problems and the circumstances that were heaped upon people who I love. And now that I'm older, I realize that's not the promise of faith. Because God is loving, because God is patient, because we believe in the invitation that the Apostle Paul in Romans 8 spoke to us, that we know that all things work together for good for those who love God, who are called according to his purpose. We can trust the promise of the cross. You see, that's the thing. The ultimate fruition of this parable is Jesus hanging on a cross. He did not destroy his enemies. He died for his enemies. He did not uproot them and give them no hope for change. He actually took their place. And when I say he took their place, I'm also saying he took my place and our place. Because he has forgiven us, because he trusted his Father's will to sort all things out at the end, he did not allow himself to be choked out or them to be choked out or uprooted. He simply lived the life that he was called to live. May we do the same. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.